Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. We're really excited to have Charlotte with us today on the show, where we're going to talk about different life experiences that have shaped her career, career transitions, and exploration of any current new projects that she's working on. She has over a decade of experience in the film industry. Charlotte has worked in mastering intricacies of film financing, international sales, and distribution. Without further ado, let's dive into it. Hi, Charlotte. Welcome to
Hi,
today's episode.
thank you for
Um,
having me.
Before we get started, I'd love to get you to introduce yourself and share a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I'm Charlotte. I'm a UK-based film executive, although currently sort of working between Salzburg and London because my current role with Redbull has me contracted out of Austria. And yeah, like you said, I've got over 10 years experience working in the film industry, mostly across international film sales, distribution, and financing, but am now dabbling in the world of development, specifically for documentaries.
Fantastic. And did you know that you wanted to get into the film industry from early on, or did you just stumble into it by accident?
I definitely stumbled. So I always knew I wanted to be in media. It was, going to the cinema, watching television, listening to music was always my favorite thing. But I actually really wanted to be a radio producer when I was at university. I even had a radio show with my friend.
Do you
Uh,
remember the name of the show?
it was called The Midnight Snack. It was me and my friend Lenny for the student radio at University of York. And it was called The Midnight Snack because we had a slot. I think it was on like a Tuesday night at 11:30 for an hour. And at midnight, we would have a mystery snack that we would eat live on air and have people guess the snack. It wasn't a great segment, but we thought it was funny. But then in my final year of university, my course was very good that they organized these sort of alumni career events where they brought people back to talk about the careers they'd found from doing English as a degree, which I did. And this wonderful woman called Elizabeth Williams, who at the time was doing acquisitions for Sky Cinema, talked about her job. And I was sort of blown away to learn that someone could have a job where it was just watching movies and deciding to buy them for a movie channel. And so I went up to her and was sort of like, I'd love to know what you do a bit more and how I get into that. And she was really kind and offered me a week's work experience at Sky after I graduated. And it sort of all went off from there, really.
Fantastic. And did you find it difficult to transition from an English degree into a film world, or was that kind of felt natural?
Uh, it didn't feel natural in like a natural sense. Like I think a lot, if you speak to a lot of people who do English literature degrees, unless you're progressing into further education or becoming a professor of literature, there's no real like natural sort of career path for someone with that
Right.
sort of degree. So there really wasn't a clear like stepping stone from graduating. But what I would say is that I discovered that a lot of people with English degrees work in the British film industry and TV industry in particular, because we all come from the British industry is very highbrow, I'd say. A lot of people have Oxbridge degrees and a lot of people have English degrees because it's a written based
Yes. They're well
industry.
versed in the
They're
language.
very well versed. So when I first stepped into the industry, it was quite sort of like, oh, everyone's really posh, everyone's really smart, everyone's extremely well read.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't a natural stepping stone, but it was certainly like not weird that I'd gone into the film industry with an English degree.
And what would you say to those people who go to film school versus not going to film school? Do you think that that's part of that would help in your career, or do you think that you can just kind of learn as you go? And in this case, you didn't go to film school,
Mm-hmm.
but you still naturally walked into this space and made
Yeah.
it your own.
Yeah, I think with film school, you definitely have an advantage. You get an earlier sort of look into the different parts of the industry. Like I really had to learn about all the different parts of the industry just by being in it.
Mhm.
I think as outsiders, all you really see of the film industry is director, producer, actors.
Yeah.
You don't know about the hundreds of jobs on film sets. You don't know about the hundreds of like business oriented jobs in distribution and financing and business affairs. So I think going to film school, so if you're really interested in that industry, like it does give you like an advantage for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy that, in the current state of the world with social media, and even back before social media, the glamour of the red carpet for the actors and the directors and the producer, kind of that being the highlight, the spotlight of the film industry. But as I very early on and rapidly got to know, was that is only like the 0.05%. And then the rest of it is kind of either you're walking through the trenches, or you're kind of, also it's there's a lot of jobs that are just computer based and very tech oriented. And there's a whole scheme of different types of jobs that people aren't really aware of.
Yeah.
And they see that those one or two, three jobs. And,
yeah. And they're not like red carpet events, for example. You don't know that there's like teams of PR people behind the stars, behind the event itself, behind the film, like organizing all of that. So, if you love a red carpet event, there's actually quite a different array of jobs you could explore beyond trying to become a producer to get onto a red carpet,
And I think just in the same sense as, what it takes to make a film, it really takes a village to make a film. So, there's so many different roles involved. And so once you did the first week work, was it a week of work?
It was a week. Yeah, it was just a week of work experience.
And how did that transition, or how did you find your other internships after that?
Then by then I'd graduated. It was like the summer of my graduation. And then it was just relentless applying for internships, finding whatever I could. And the film industry, we're not great at jobs boards. Like I found that like there weren't traditional advertising sites for film jobs. So I knew that Film 4 and BBC Films did like internships, monthly internship schemes. So I applied for those, and I was really lucky to get a month work experience with BBC Films. And that brought me to London, because at the time I was living in York after I graduated. And once you're in London, the world sort of opens up a bit. So you start to meet people, you meet other assistants, or, they sort of tell you about the other things that are going on. And once the BBC Films internship was coming to an end, I then just got really hands-on with trying to find my next thing. And that was cold emailing production companies, asking if they were hiring for work experience or interns. And I was willing to do anything, basically. And then and then I managed to get like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, mostly unpaid. It was like expenses, which is barely anything.
Yeah. Living in London, it must be.
Living in London. Thankfully, I had some savings. I'm very lucky in that sense.
And what would you say the secret to cold emailing is?
Be short, be direct. Like, don't give them your life story in an email. Just, hi, are you looking for someone? That's literally what they need.
Yeah.
If you have a little bit of experience, put it in there. Be clear about your interests. I'm interested in your company because you make these films and I really love them, etc., etc. When you're that early on in your career, you probably don't have much of a CV to speak of anyway.
Yeah.
But, you can sort of put things like, I had a bar job when I was a student. So, through that, I could sort of say, I work hard, I can be really hands-on. And like most of these work experience internship jobs was like making teas for people.
Yeah.
I remember one of my first internship jobs. One of the execs was like, one of the best things you can do as an intern that will leave an impression is make a really good cup of tea. I don't know if that's applicable for the rest of the world, but it certainly leaves a mark in the UK.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that would be applicable. I'm based in Barcelona, Spain. I'm not sure if a good old cup of tea would
maybe a cup of coffee.
Really good, nice
really good coffee.
Yeah, might be the move over here. So you went from cold emailing producers, production companies to now potentially being the one receiving cold emails.
Yeah. A lot of LinkedIn, messages, actually. Yeah,
fantastic. And I remember you shared a little bio with us before getting on today, and you mentioned that early on in your career you faced 2 moments in your career where you were left redundant in a job. Can you elaborate a little bit about what happened, or what were the reasoning for those?
Yeah, I mean, both instances were sort of examples of how volatile our industry is. And also, I think it was the beginning of the industry starting to sort of, shrink. There's the beginning of the shrink, I guess, to where we are now. So my first full-time job was with Focus Features when they had an international sales division. We had a great team. It was a great time. But at the end of my year with them, the whole team was made redundant, including myself, because Universal had decided to, I think, acquire another company that made our team redundant. And actually, the same thing happened at E1, which was my next full-time job, actually. Again, a great international sales division. We did some amazing films like Spotlight and Trumbo and Captain Fantastic. But E1, which is a big Canadian conglomerate, bought Sierra Affinity, which is a independent sales agent in LA, which again rendered our team pointless. So yeah, like this whole age of companies being merged and bought, it's not a new thing. It's been happening for years.
Yeah, and you mentioned the shrinkage as well. That's also making mergers and acquisitions let people go because there's not enough work going around, maybe. And do you think that there's also a movement now, or with the future of artificial intelligence, of potentially that shrinkage getting bigger, or not shrinker getting?
Yeah. No, I get what you mean. Yeah. I don't know. I always feel like we work in a creative industry at the end of the day. I think, things like AI may affect roles that are sort of more practical, and actually more boring. I actually think assistants, maybe Hollywood execs will have one less assistant because they can get AI to do their scheduling. But you still need, our industry is a very people-based industry. Even
story-based,
story, imagination. You can't teach AI, or at least I don't think you can.
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah, exactly. To imagine an original story, you can get it to fill in the gaps, maybe, but to come up with something genuinely original, and maybe studios will use it to, cost
automate,
or iterations of franchises and stuff. But you'll always need that human element at the end of the day.
Definitely. And I think also, I agree with you. The AI could help with the boring parts of the job, automating, the little bureaucratic part of the jobs. But tell me how an AI can, go out and find a story about somebody who's doing amazing things,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
There's so many stories that are people based that, are never really going to get substitute it out. And like you said, if it does, then we'll get the same version every single time over and over again.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can teach him imagination.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. That's the secret. That's where our hope still lies in. And yeah, so now, so after all these different internships and working at two companies that have, you know, had mergers and seen shrinkages, how did you transition into international sales to financing, or was it financing to then international sales? Because you did both, right?
Yeah. So the first two jobs I had at Focus and E1 were both roles in international sales teams, where I sort of straddled being an assistant or / coordinator between sales and marketing. Then I went to a small independent financing firm. It was really a startup, and that was my first experience of working in a small independent company, actually, like full time. And that's where I learned.
You prefer to work in a small company or in one of these bigger E1s, or?
There's pros and cons to both. To be honest, like with smaller companies, I think you have a bit more freedom to imagine ways of doing things, and you know, you have a bit more scope to explore things you might want to do as an executive, perhaps. Although, of course, that always, at the end of the day, depends on who you work for. Whereas with big companies, there is a lot of security there. I mean, I say that as someone who's been made redundant twice, but you know, you have this big structure around you. There's like corporate benefits, and you get like good pensions and stuff. So it's a much more comfortable environment to be in, for sure. But you do have to jump through a lot of corporate hoops when you work at big companies like that. Yeah,
definitely. And so going back to going from international sales to financing, and what do you think were some of the main differences that you've had from international sales to your role in financing? What were some things that new things that you had to learn that you didn't know? Or
so much. I mean, like financing, like I had to learn all these new like financial terms and like stuff, because when you're in international sales, it's really quite almost one way. You get the film, you think, how much can I sell this for? And then you go to market and you try to make up those numbers. With financing, it's like, how much do we put in order to get like something out? And then you've got to think of all the contributing factors and how you get that money back, and the modeling. Like, I've never seen sort of like financial modeling to the extent that we saw. I mean, I was a creative exec with this company as well. So my job was really like, this is a great script. Can we finance it? And then the finance people would like do their models and be like, maybe.
We'll see.
You will see.
Yeah. Interesting. And what do you think are key skills that people would need to have to work in acquisitions or in financing in film?
Yeah. Well, with financing, you know, I think a general comfort with numbers is definitely necessary. And it depends what kind of role you want in financing as well. Yeah. Like if you want to do like the terms and you want to like do the business interactions, you've got to be really comfortable with numbers, negotiation, you know, business acumen. And that's not, you don't necessarily need a degree in business. It's probably helpful. Like I learned a lot of that stuff on the job. Yeah. Personally, I don't know if I'm any good at it. You'll have to ask someone else. But yeah, definitely being comfortable with that stuff.
We'll get a referral.
Yeah. And then in acquisitions, it's hard to say like what makes you good at acquisitions. Like obviously taste is essential, but what makes good taste is such an open question. Yeah. And then I think taste in our industry is a really interesting question as well, because you can have good taste, but it's not commercial taste. Yeah. Or you can have really commercial taste. You can have a taste for movies that always makes money, but they're not considered good. Right. So it really, like when you want to work in acquisitions, you really have to look at the kind of company you want to work for as well. Like if you're working for a big studio that and you're working in the department that just wants to release blockbusters, like you have to love that kind of film. Whereas if you're working for maybe a more art house, boutique label, that should be your taste for acquisition. So
so know your taste, because like
yeah,
it would make sense if I was really into these independent art house films to go work in a blockbuster based company and trying to sell them the movie that I just watched, which they might not understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, you know, people skills, like I said, it's a people-based industry, so that's really important. And, you know, one thing I really value from my experience of working in sales is sales skills, which isn't something just unique to like a sales role. We actually all have to do it in this industry, whether you're a producer or an acquisitions exec, because you're constantly selling the idea of what you want to someone. As a producer, you're selling your project to someone to get financing. As an acquisitions person, you're probably selling up to your managers to convince them to buy whatever movie it is that you think is really good. So learning to pitch and present and sort of convince people to your side of things is essential, I think, to any role in our industry.
Definitely, and at every level as well, because especially once you're starting out and you're trying to get your pitch heard or trying to sell a concept, you need to, because there's some great scripts and great writers and great directors who might not have the skill set to, you know, pitch, and then you have the opposite where they're really good at pitching, but then they have really bad ideas, you know. So one of the first things that I was taught was that this is it's show business for a reason, because you need to be able to pitch and sell your concept constantly, and so that's definitely I wrote that down and highlighted it over and over again, because it's one that keeps coming back to everyone we talk to. And you mentioned that you also did you work at STX, right, as well?
Yes. So my last job before joining Redbull was I spent almost 5 years at STX in the London office in international sales.
And what was the motivating reason for you to go from STX to Redbull Studios?
Well, I'd been at STX for almost 5 years, which is quite a long time. And, you know, I was sort of exploring what else was out there in the world for me. Let's hope my boss never hears this, my old boss. And Red Bull sort of messaged me on LinkedIn. It was
a cold email.
Yeah, for fortuitous timing. And, you know, they presented me the role and asked if I was interested. And I think, you know, I've always been one to always be open to an opportunity. I think you know, opportunities in our industry are so limited.
Yeah, you got to jump on them when
exactly.
They come.
You never have to say yes. Like exploring an opportunity isn't a commitment. So sort of went down the road, and eventually they were like, "We'd like you to take the role," and I was like, "Oh, okay, sure."
Did you find the move to Salzburg challenging?
Me personally, yes. You know, I grew up in a city. I grew up in Hong Kong, and then I've spent the last 10 years in London. So I'm very much a city person. And if anyone's been to Salzburg, they'll know that it is small. Having been to university in York, I think it really did prepare me for life in Salzburg. They're quite comparable cities, in size and vibe. But it was definitely challenging because my partner still lives in London, and you know, I just have a lot of home comforts in big cities that I can't get in Salzburg.
Going from London to Salzburg is a big jump as well. And did you find any big differences from your previous roles to now working in documentary development?
I mean, yeah, 100%. Like the first thing that surprised me about documentaries was that it is a completely separate industry to the industry I was already in. You sort of think film, TV, documentaries, like we're all one big happy family, but there is cross-pollination, but like actually they are quite separate circles. So I had to build an entirely new network of contacts. I had to learn like who the players were in documentary, like how, and like development as a whole was a whole new workflow for me. So learning, sort of figuring out how to do that. And then, and putting a documentary together is like putting a scripted film together backwards. Because you know, the script really comes after you do all the filming in documentary, right? Which for me is kind of nuts. I mean, you can do some documentaries like a scripted format if you're just doing archive and stuff. You can sort of build it from the ground up.
And there's hybrid opportunities as well, and kind of do like a bit of a fiction hybrid documentary that allow you to do this script to film.
Exactly.
But yeah, my first ever personal project that before going to film school, I went to film school for a year, and during COVID, which was not ideal. It was like not going to film school. But besides that, before that, I went to the Caribbean to go shoot a documentary, and I had like written out a whole concept, you know, did all my research, wrote a script, went to the island. It was my script. Threw it out, started over, filmed everything, got to the editing room, was editing myself, and then that's when I had a whole new script. So it was just kind of like continuously reinventing itself along the way, because documentaries kind of have that flow, which can be difficult sometimes to kind of wrap your head around that sometimes. But
for sure, I mean, there's just a lot of, I mean, it's lower risk in the sense that documentaries don't cost as much as scripted films, of course. But like, you don't know what you're gonna get. And also you could go in shooting and you end up not getting an ending or any kind of arc. You're just filming with someone, and then you sort of, there's always a moment perhaps where you might have to just go, actually, this isn't going anywhere. I've just wasted 6 months.
And you know, sometimes in documentaries you don't have the opportunity to really to have a take two, you know. It's, in a lot of instances it's a take one type of thing, and either you get it or you don't.
Exactly.
You know, like if you're filming a soccer match, you're gonna get that goal once and the reaction once, you know. And are you currently working on any exciting projects that you're allowed to share, or personal projects that you're working on that are maybe documentary, maybe fiction, or another creative outlet?
I mean, I don't really have any personal projects on the go at the moment. And in terms of projects I can talk about at Red Bull, we do have a really great project going on in Brazil. I never thought I'd find myself working on a football show, but here I am. I'm working with the wonderful team at Beyond Films, which is Ronaldo's production company. And we're working together with Red Bull Bragantino, who is a football team that the brand owns, to do a sort of all access behind the scenes series with the team. And it's for local broadcast really, but we're hoping that there will be something in it that could also appeal to a broader audience. Because people love football.
And we're seeing such a big trend in sports documentaries that, you know, the nicher they are, the more they get picked up, and people get so invested in them. So yeah, that's really exciting. And have you had the chance to go down to Brazil yet?
Not yet. That's my goal for this year. Hopefully I can go later this year.
Fantastic. And what trends do you see in documentary filmmaking that excite you the most right now? Or
I think there is space for filmmakers to get more and more creative in how they tell stories in documentary. Like bringing, I mean, you're seeing a lot more scripted filmmakers are transitioning over into docs, or at least doing one or two, because they also find the unpredictability of people fascinating, I think. And I think there is scope for documentaries to take inspiration from scripted films and
Definitely.
find ways of making documentaries engaging in different ways than just sort of point and shoot and verite filmmaking. So yeah, I think there's a lot to explore there.
And is there any type of stories that you want to see more of come up, or?
You know, diversity is always a big question on my mind. Like when you look at a lot of docs that are out there, you know, the big profile docs, a lot of them are still on like legacy artists and etc. And then when you see documentaries about people of color, they do tend to come from places of strife, like, you know, documentaries on war or poverty or like, you know, world issues. It would just be great to see more stories about positive stories about people of color succeeding or people of different genders and sexualities and stuff. I just feel like there's a lot of stories out there of people who aren't white and straight, and it tends to come from a place of difficulty.
And you correct me if I'm wrong, but you have an initiative in the UK, a diversity and inclusion initiative in the UK, or did I misunderstand that?
Well, the UK sort of has quite a few initiatives around diversity. I was lucky myself to be invited by Film London to do the Break the Glass Ceiling program. I encourage any UK execs to seek this out. I think they do it yearly or maybe every other year. I can't recall, but they've done 3 different cohorts now, and it's a really great program that is free, and it's essentially career and personal progression for execs of color in the film and TV industry. And yeah, it was just a really open space for the 10 of us to come together and just talk about, you know, problems we were having, or just discussing shared experiences. It's incredible what just having a space to just openly talk.
Yeah, and share stories.
Yeah, exactly. And then we also did like sort of management training stuff.
Yeah.
And
a little bit of that.
And a little bit of that.
Yeah. And just to wrap up, kind of looking back on your career, what are some things that you're the most proud of?
That I'm still in it. Somehow.
You're hanging on, you're still in there.
I'm hanging on.
Yeah. Or I'll phrase it a bit differently. Is there anything that you would have done differently if you given the chance?
I don't think so. I think, again, like when I first entered the industry, like I think like almost everyone who enters the film industry, development is like the thing you want to do. Like I want to work on scripts. I want to put projects together. But actually falling into sales, I think, was a great thing, because you learn about almost every part of the industry just from this one tiny sector. Well, the independent industry, just from this one tiny like role, because you essentially have a point of view from development all the way through to distribution, which is unique and actually quite essential to move into other roles. Yeah. Just a really overview understanding of the industry can give a lot of people an edge in different ways. Yeah. You know, would I have done anything different? Maybe I would have, I don't know, tried to do creative stuff on my own. There's still time for that though.
Oh, there's plenty of time. I mean, you've got all the skills to, take any personal projects if you want to go into documentary or fiction, take it to the next level. You've got an edge over us.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Have you explored fiction by outside of the work you've done in acquisitions and international sales? Development, as in
no, as in develop. So all my jobs before Red Bull were scripted films.
Mm-hmm.
But with Red Bull, it's just documentaries. And in terms of me working in development, I've actually only worked with documentaries. I've never done development for scripted.
Is that something that is on your radar for
I'd
the
love
future?
to. Yeah. Call me, anyone.
You heard it here first. Well, Charlotte, thank you so much for having this conversation with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.